Welcome to our channel, where stories that seem impossible come to life. Today, you're about to witness a journey filled with tears, betrayal, crushing failures, and ultimately, a triumph so satisfying it will leave you cheering. This is the story of a woman, once a broke single mom with nothing but her willpower and her bare hands, who turned humiliation into motivation, failure into fuel, and step by step built her own billion-dollar empire. From the long nights working just to feed her child, to facing rejection and ridicule from the most powerful people in the room, and then flipping the script with a legendary comeback, every twist is packed into these 8 dramatic chapters. If you're looking for a story that will move you, thrill you, and most importantly, convince you that nothing is impossible, this is it. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because right now we're diving into the journey from broke single mom to billion-dollar CEO, a story you'll never forget. There are days when you just want to disappear from the face of the earth. For her, a single mom in her 20s, that fateful day arrived on a gloomy morning when her wallet held exactly $12. 12! Not enough for gas, certainly not enough for diapers and milk for her 3-year-old Dot. Staring at the dusty bathroom mirror, she laughed. Not the happy kind of laugh, but the bitter, sarcastic kind. Well, hello, future CEO. You look exactly like a sleep-deprived zombie. Dark circles, messy hair, and a spirit scraping the bottom of despair. Her ex-husband? Oh, he had vanished long ago, leaving behind debt and promises cheaper than a packet of instant noodles on clearance. Family? They cared, sure, but everyone was busy with their own lives. And let's be honest, no one wants to babysit the daughter who made mistakes forever. That morning, she stepped outside with a torn handbag slung over her shoulder, and one question echoed in her head. Can I possibly sink any lower than this? Here's the funny thing about life. It loves to test your limits. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, congratulations. There's a basement waiting for you. And true to that cruel script, that very afternoon she was fired. The reason? The company needs someone more dynamic, more professional looking. Translation? They were tired of seeing a single mom show up late because she had to drop her kid off at daycare. Standing outside the office gates, clutching a pile of old folders, she felt her heart plummet into her stomach. But strangely, instead of crying, she burst out laughing, a bitter, defiant laugh. Because sometimes when every door slams shut, you realize you've got nothing left to lose, and that, ironically, is the perfect place for something extraordinary to begin. The next morning she woke up earlier than usual. Not out of excitement. No. Her toddler had cried all night, so even the alarm clock felt pity and gave up. She brewed a cheap cup of coffee, black and bitter like her life, then pulled on an old frayed blazer to go job hunting. In her hands was a stack of resumes, printed on a noisy old photocopier down the street. She went from company to company, wearing a forced smile, trying her best to look professional. But every time, the same thing happened. The interviewer skimmed her resume, then looked up at her with that all-too-familiar mix of pity and disdain. You took time off to raise your kid? Are you sure you can handle the workload? Oh, we're actually looking for someone a little more youthful. Sorry, the position has already been filled. Rejection after rejection piled up. By late afternoon, her cheap heels rubbed her feet raw, leaving blood on her heels. But physical pain was nothing compared to the sting in her chest every time she heard the dreaded line, "We'll be in touch," which, as everyone knows, really means, don't hold your breath. On the way home, her little boy clung to her neck and chirped, "Mommy, did you find a job today?" She hugged him tighter, forcing a crooked smile. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy's about to find one." Lies had never been easier to say, nor more painful to feel. And yet, here's the irony. Those very rejections became fuel for something bigger. Instead of breaking her, they sparked a dangerous, defiant thought in her mind. If no one is going to give me a chance, why don't I create one for myself? That night, the tiny apartment was swallowed in darkness, lit only by the faint yellow glow of a flickering bulb over the worn-out kitchen table. She sat there, staring at a stack of rejected resumes, piled high like a cruel reminder. The doors of society have slammed shut in your face. Her little boy was fast asleep, clutching his torn teddy bear, but she couldn't close her eyes. One question kept hammering in her head. How will I survive if this goes on? And then she laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh. How ridiculous! I'm begging them, groveling for a tiny chair in a room full of people who look down on me. Why? Why do I need their permission to exist? That moment was like a slap in the face, a wake-up call. For the first time, she dared to think something she'd never dared before. If no one wants to hire me, then why don't I just hire myself? At first, the thought sounded insane. A broke single mom with $12 to her name, drowning. In debt, no connections, no capital. What on earth could she possibly do? But then she remembered. Every great entrepreneur had started from zero. Some even started from less than zero. And if they could do it, why couldn't she at least try? Slowly, an image formed in her mind. A tiny venture built by her own hands. A job where no one could fire her, no one could belittle her. A place where every dollar earned, no matter how small, was the result of her sweat and tears. That night, for the first time in months, she fell into a deep sleep. Not because the fear had vanished, but because she had found a tiny flicker of fire in the darkness, a fire that could burn away every doubt if only she had the courage to keep it alive. The next morning, she opened her wallet and realized that $12 had turned into 4. 3 crumpled singles and 1 lonely coin clinking like it was mocking her. You didn't need to be a math genius to see it. That money wasn't enough for a week. Hell, it wasn't even enough for a single decent day. For a moment, fear consumed her. That suffocating feeling of being cornered, trapped, with no way out. People always said, hang in there, it'll get better. But who was going to pay the rent? Who was going to buy milk for the little boy waiting at home? Faith? Faith doesn't. Pay the damn bills. Tears spilled onto the table, smearing the scribbled business ideas she had jotted down in desperation the night before. A voice in her head screamed, You're insane! What do you know about business? Who are you to dream about billions? Her fists clenched so tight her knuckles turned white, ready to punch the mirror. But then, her eyes landed on a photo of her son, smiling innocently, taped to the window. And in that instant, a fire ignited. She whispered, almost like an oath, Fine, if the whole world wants to corner me, then I'll just break the damn wall. In that moment, fear transformed into fury. Fury at the husband who had abandoned her. Fury at the interviewers who dismissed her. Fury at a society that looked down on single mothers. And that fury, mixed with the love she carried for her son, became her fuel. With just $4. In her pocket, she made a decision to start her own business. No grand plan, no investors, just a vague idea and a burning heart. But sometimes, the only thing you need is one reckless leap in the face of despair. Starting a business sounds glamorous, but for her back then, it was more like trying to complete a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Capital? None. Experience? 0. All she had was a head bursting with crazy ideas and a heart cornered into a fight-or-die situation. She started with the smallest things. Someone needed a resume written? She took it. Another needed documents typed up? She took that too. Sometimes she even doubled as a shipper, helping neighbors sell random items, anything to scrape together enough money for her son's milk. But life wasn't about to make it easy. On her very first typing gig, her old computer suddenly puffed out smoke like a firecracker, forcing her to rush to a copy shop and type all night just to meet the deadline. The next day, the client paid her $20, but after bus fare and copy shop fees, she walked away with 7, less than washing dishes. At times, she asked herself, what the hell am I doing? Is this really a business? Or just some twisted survival game? But then, in the middle of her doubt, her son handed her a crooked little drawing of the two of them holding hands with the words Supermom scribbled underneath. Suddenly, those $7 felt more valuable than a mountain of gold. The strange thing was, from those odd jobs, she started learning her first real lessons in business: how to negotiate, how to talk to customers, how to keep her word, and, most importantly, how no one was coming to save her but herself. Entrepreneurship, it turned out, didn't start with glory. It started with worn-out shoes, sleepless nights, and bitter laughs muttered under your breath. I really must be crazy. After weeks of scraping by with odd jobs, a thought sparked in her head. I can't keep surviving like this forever. I need something that's truly mine. And so, her first real business idea was born: a handmade pastry business. Sounds cute, right? In reality, it was anything but romantic. Her tiny kitchen became a factory with a wheezing old oven that sounded ready to explode. Every batch of pastries came with a prayer: please don't burn, don't explode, don't turn into a biological weapon. She proudly carried her first boxes of pastries to a nearby cafe. The owner took a bite, frowned, and muttered, edible but a bit burnt. I'll try a few boxes. He set the pastries down like he was handling a small bomb. Disappointed? Absolutely. Ready to quit? Many times. But when a random customer at the cafe tried one and said, hey, these are actually pretty good, her heart skipped a beat. Not everyone rejected her. Some people could see the value in what she had made. Day by day, she kept baking, kept selling, though profits were practically zero. Some nights, when a batch went wrong, she and her son ate burnt pastries for dinner. Other days, she delivered boxes in the pouring rain, holding an umbrella over her child while her own clothes were drenched. So tragic, it was almost funny. But it was in those struggles that she learned her first big lesson. Business isn't always about profit. Every failure was a step closer to the right path, and the scariest thing wasn't losing money. It was never daring to start at all. One rainy morning, she packed up boxes of pastries, half burnt, half raw, her heart heavy with shame. The night before, her old oven had betrayed her again. She thought of tossing them out, but the debt for flour was still looming, so she shoved them into boxes, praying someone would be merciful. On the way to deliver them, she slipped, and the entire box scattered across the steps of an office building. Burnt pastries rolled under the polished shoes of office workers. Laughter erupted. Some even sneered. Hey, it's the CEO of Burnt Pastries handing out samples. Brand new company, Burnt and Charred Company, Limited. Her lips trembled, but before she could break, a woman in a sharp blazer stepped forward. She picked up one pastry, took a bite, and the laughter stopped. The woman frowned, then burst into a laugh. Yup, definitely burnt. But you know what? It's strangely interesting. Who baked these? Hesitantly, she raised her hand. I did. The woman handed her a business card, manager of a local cafe chain. You've got guts. The pastries are awful, but I like your spirit. Meet me next week. I want to see what you can do with a proper kitchen. For a moment, she froze. From utter humiliation came an opportunity she'd never gotten after months of begging for jobs. That day, for the first time in years, she cried right there on the street. But these tears were different. Not from failure, but from seeing a door crack open, just when she thought the world had slammed them all shut. A week later, she walked into the polished office of the cafe chain. Her old blazer was ironed so hard it was on the verge of tearing, and her worn-out heels had been buffed to a fake shine. She whispered to herself, fake confidence until they believe it. The manager, Mrs. Simmons, sat across the table, eyes sharp as X-rays. No small talk, no smiles. "Listen," she said flatly, "I don't care about touching backstories. I only want to know one thing. Can you make something actually good?" Her heart pounded. This wasn't practice anymore. This was the only chance. She opened a box of pastries, baked with the very last of her money, flour, sugar, butter, all scraped together from the final few dollars. Mrs. Simmons broke off a piece, chewed slowly. The silence was deafening. 1 second, 2 seconds. Her entire life balanced on a thread. Then. Simmons swallowed, set the pastry down, and finally spoke. "Not perfect, but it has potential. You're different. This pastry has a story, and customers, they like a story." She nearly collapsed into her chair, not from exhaustion, but from relief. One nod from this woman was worth more than $1 million. "Check." Mrs. Simmons leaned forward, voice stern but oddly encouraging. "I'll give you a chance. 1 week, 1 store. If customers like it, we'll talk. If not," she shrugged. "We never met." A door to the future cracked open, but at the same time, a blade of pressure dangled above her head. 1 week. Just 1 week to prove she wasn't crazy, and that a broke single mom could rewrite the game. The moment she stepped out of Mrs. Simmons's office, she nearly collapsed onto the sidewalk. 1 week, just 7 days. To do what? To prove she deserved a chance. Simple in words, brutal in reality. Like asking someone who just learned to float to dive headfirst into a stormy ocean. She hustled everywhere. Borrowed a neighbor's kitchen, begged for old utensils from corner shops, pleaded for bags of flour and sticks of butter like a professional beggar. At one point, she laughed, bitterly. If there was an Oscar for best performance as a broke, desperate mom, I'd win Best Actress, no contest. Her apartment turned into a pastry laboratory, dozens of failed batches piled into the trash. Her son became the chief taste tester, wrinkling his nose. "Mom, this one's too burnt, but I'll eat it anyway." And he did, because he didn't want to see her sad. The pressure wasn't just money or time. It was that invisible dread. If I fail, this might be my last chance. Every thought of it squeezed her chest tighter, like a fist closing in. Yet, amidst the chaos, she began to find a rhythm. The pastries were still burnt, but less so. The flavor started to have something different, unique, unmistakable. And for the first time, she dared to believe. Maybe, just maybe, she could pull this off. 1 week. It sounded like a death sentence, but it might also be her golden ticket. Out of hell. And the clock kept ticking, cold and merciless, whispering, "You have 6 days left."
Day 2, her tiny apartment looked like a war zone. Flour exploded through the air like smoke from a bomb. Sugar clung to every surface, and the smell of scorched butter seeped into her clothes. She kneaded dough like a woman possessed, muttering to herself, "Don't burn, don't come out raw. This time it has to work." Her little boy sat in the corner, clutching his teddy bear, eyes wide with both excitement and worry. Then he asked the simplest, most devastating question. "Mom, if your cakes are good, will we have enough money to buy the toy car I want?" Her hands froze midair, sticky with dough. That innocent question stabbed deeper than any insult. It reminded her that this fight wasn't just about survival. It was about giving her son a sliver of joy, a reason to smile. That night, after putting him to sleep, she returned to the kitchen. The ticking clock sounded like war drums. She baked another batch. This time they didn't burn. The sweet smell filled the room. She cried because at last there was hope. Cried because she knew there was no turning back. But joy lasted only minutes. The old oven suddenly coughed out a loud pop and died. Black smoke curled into the air. It was gone completely. She let out a hollow laugh, tears streaming down her face. Of course. Just when you think you've won a round, life reminds you. The war isn't over yet, sweetheart. 6 days left. 1 week to prove herself. And now, without the only weapon she ever had. The next morning, she sat staring at the charred oven, nothing more than a corpse on a battlefield. The room reeked of smoke. Her son tugged at her sleeve and whispered, "Mom, can we still make cakes?" She forced a smile, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Of course, sweetheart. Supermom never gives up." But reality was cruel. Without an oven, even Supermom was powerless. So she began the humiliating quest, knocking on neighbors' doors, begging to borrow a kitchen. First door. An old woman shook her head. "My stove's too old, it won't survive." Second door, a store owner sneered. "You bake? I thought all you did was fail job interviews." The words stabbed deep, but she still smiled, thanked him and walked away. Finally, at the last apartment, a young mother holding her baby nodded. "All right, but only at night. I need the kitchen for my family during the day." And so, each night, she dragged bags of flour, sugar, and butter into someone else's kitchen, baking until dawn. The clatter of the oven, her son's cries in the unfamiliar space, all blended into a chaotic symphony of resilience. Some nights, angry neighbors banged on the door. "Are you turning this place into a factory?" She bowed, apologized, then kept working, tears dripping into the flour and smoke. But strangely enough, those nights brought progress. The pastries began to improve. No more charred disasters, no more raw dough. She was closing in on something close to perfection. And deep inside, a flicker of faith returned. Maybe, just maybe, this would win the customers' hearts. She whispered to herself, "Laugh at me, mock me, curse me. One day, you'll be standing in line for my cakes." 3 days left. Just 3 days until her pastries would debut at the cafe. Every tick of the clock slammed into her chest like a hammer. She no longer knew if it was day or night. Her world was nothing but flour, butter smoke, and the groans of a borrowed oven. Pressure made her a little crazy. One night, she found herself laughing hysterically, talking to the oven like it was a stubborn friend. "Don't betray me again. Just 3 more days. After that, you can die however you want." Her son had become her tiny assistant, sprinkling powdered sugar and sticking crooked labels onto pastry boxes. Watching him work so hard, she felt both proud and heartbroken. He should be sleeping, playing, not fighting this war with me. On the night before the big day, she baked a massive batch, the official version for the cafe. But when she opened the oven, her heart sank. Half the pastries were burnt. The acrid smell filled the kitchen. Tears streamed down her face. Less than 48 hours left, and everything threatened to crumble. Then she remembered something she'd once read. People don't buy products. They buy emotions and stories. And suddenly she understood. What made her pastries different wasn't perfection. It was that they carried her sweat, her burns, her tears, and her love. So instead of throwing them out, she kept even the slightly burnt ones, placing them beside the golden brown pieces. She thought, if they want a story, this is the truest one. A single mom fighting every day just to keep the fire alive. 24 hours until showtime. She looked at the clock, her heartbeat pounding like war drums. Tomorrow would decide it all, takeoff or freefall. That morning, she walked into the cafe with pastry boxes in her hands, her heart pounding like war drums. Her old blazer had been washed to the point of fading, her heels clacking loudly on the wooden floor, each step carrying her fate. Mrs. Simmons was waiting. No small talk, just a nod toward the counter. The pastries were placed down. Staff whispered, customers glanced over. The air grew thick, like the cafe had turned into a courtroom. The first pastry was cut, placed neatly on a white plate. A middle-aged man picked up his fork, took a bite. Silence. He frowned slightly. Her heart nearly tore out of her chest. Then he swallowed, nodding slowly. Not bad. Different. Not like the usual stuff. Another customer, a young woman, tried one. Her eyes lit up. "Oh my God, this is way better than I expected. Who made these?" Mrs. Simmons shot her a sharp glance, half stern, half satisfied. Her whole body trembled. In that moment, all the sleepless nights, the mocking laughter, the endless rejections came crashing back. But instead of collapsing, she broke down in tears. Right there in front of everyone. Not tears of shame. Tears of recognition. For the first time, her effort was seen, acknowledged. With a nod, a compliment, a spark of belief. Judgment Day hadn't become an execution. It had become a fire, burning away every last shred of fear inside her. And in that moment she knew. This was only the beginning. That day, her pastries didn't exactly sell out. But people tasted them, some praised them, and others asked questions. For a broke single mom, that alone felt like a miracle. That afternoon, when the cafe quieted down, Mrs. Simmons called her into the office. Fingers tapping on the desk, her gaze as sharp as a blade. Better than I expected. But not enough. A few compliments don't make a brand. You want to go further? Then prove it. Her palms were slick with sweat. Next week, Simmons continued, my cafe chain opens a new branch. I'll give you one chance. Make 200 servings. If customers like them, I'll sign you for the long term. If you fail, she paused, lips curling, you'll disappear as if you never existed. 100 servings. Her breath caught. 200 wasn't just a few trial batches in a borrowed kitchen. It was an operation. It was responsibility, trust, and a death sentence if she slipped. On the way home, her son tugged at her hand. Mom, did you win today? She squeezed his tiny fingers, forcing a smile. Not yet, but I'm about to enter the biggest battle of my life. Inside, the fire roared stronger. Fear still lingered, but now it mixed with anger, pride, and a fragile but fierce belief. I can do this. That night she couldn't sleep. The number 200 thundered in her head like war drums. For a big company, 200 servings was nothing. But for a single mom in a tiny apartment, it was like carrying 200 mountains on her back. She started calculating. How much flour? How much butter? How much sugar? The total was far beyond what her wallet held. She had no choice but to borrow more, begging for credit from the corner store. The shopkeeper sighed. If you fail, I lose everything. She forced a smile. If I fail, I'll pay you back with my labor. But I won't fail. For several nights, the borrowed kitchen turned into a mini factory. Flour covered the floor, sugar stuck in her hair, and her son became a professional packaging worker. He carefully stuck labels on boxes, crooked, upside down, sideways. She wanted to cry and laugh all at once. It's okay. As long as your heart is in it, it's perfect. But effort came with a cost. Her hands blistered from oven burns, her eyes bloodshot from no sleep. At times, in the suffocating kitchen, she collapsed into a chair, whispering, how can I do this? I'm no superhero. Then in the silence, her little boy ran up, pressing a tiny pastry into her hand. Eat, mommy. You are my superhero. And just like that she stood back up. 3 days left. 200 pastries. A battle of life and death. If she lost, she'd lose everything. But if she won, it would change her life forever. The final night. No turning back. The borrowed kitchen glowed like a tiny factory. Flour dusted every surface, and her hair, making her look like some tragic version of the pastry fairy. The clock ticked mercilessly. 200 pastries before sunrise. Her blistered hands trembled, but she kept kneading, cutting, baking, batch after batch. Sweat and tears dripped straight into the dough, mixed into every bite. Suddenly, click. The power blew. Darkness swallowed the room. Her heart nearly stopped. She ran out, pounding on the landlord's door, almost begging. Please reset the breaker. I have to finish this. If I don't, everything is ruined. He grumbled. At this hour? You trying to burn the house down? But eventually he flipped it back on. She stumbled back to the kitchen, pressing on. Her eyes drooped, her body screamed. At one point, she dozed off in the chair for mere minutes, only to jolt awake at the smell of smoke. Another batch ruined, charred to ash. She bit her lip until it bled, wiped her tears and started over. Her son slept curled up in the corner, clutching his torn teddy bear, tiny bare feet pulled close to his chest. The sight broke her heart, but it also fueled her with a strange, unstoppable strength. And when the first light of dawn crept through the window, the last of the 200 pastry boxes sat neatly stacked on the table. They weren't just pastries. They were sweat, blood, and the pride of a mother who refused to give up. She collapsed onto the floor, breathless, smiling through her tears. It's done. Whatever happens now, I've already won against myself. That morning the sun blazed bright, but inside her storms raged. She and her son hauled the heavy pastry boxes, as if carrying their entire fate on their shoulders. At the cafe entrance, her legs trembled. Her heartbeat thundered like it might tear through her chest. Inside, the place was buzzing, packed with guests, laughter echoing. And right at the center, a large table draped in spotless white cloth awaited, the stage for her 200 pastries. A spotlight without lights, and she, the lead actor in this life-or-death play. Mrs. Simmons appeared, stern and sharp, her voice like ice. This is your one chance. If your pastries win them over, we sign. If not, she locked eyes with her, then today is also your last. She inhaled deeply, placing each box carefully on the table. Each one felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, pressing down on her shaking hands. Her little boy whispered beside her, "Mommy, you can do it." Just one sentence, but it straightened her spine, gave her strength. The first guests approached. A young woman, a middle-aged couple, a few polished businesspeople. They picked up pastries, lifted them to their mouths. Café grew silent, every eye fixed on the chewing, the expressions forming on customers' faces. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Her heart hung suspended, ready to drop. Her son squeezed her hand tight, his wide eyes waiting for an answer that could change everything.
The middle-aged man chewed slowly, his brows furrowed. Her heart stopped cold. Mrs. Simmons stood with arms crossed, watching like a judge, not blinking once. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Then he set the fork down and spoke. "Not like the pastries I usually eat. But there's something unique here. This flavor, it reminds me of my childhood." A faint smile tugged at his lips. Her body trembled. Relief nearly washed over her, but then the young woman chimed in, voice sharp. "Yeah, it's different. But honestly, not everyone's going to like it. It's a little unusual." A murmur rippled through the cafe. One customer shrugged. "Too sweet for me." Another countered. "No, I like it. At least it's not boring like the stuff everywhere else." Her heart stretched taut, caught between hope and doubt. Sweat streamed down her forehead, but she forced herself to stand tall, hiding the quake inside. That's when Mrs. Simmons finally spoke, her tone cutting like a blade. "See? That's the problem. Your product divides people. Some love it, some dismiss it. The question is, can you turn this unusual into a brand?" That icy stare pierced straight through her. And in that suffocating moment, she realized, the real trial wasn't over. This was only the beginning. In that moment, the cafe felt like an arena. Every eye fixed on her, the woman with blistered hands, a worn-out blazer, and eyes blazing with fear and fire. Mrs. Simmons repeated, her tone sharp. "Different can be strength, or disaster. How do you intend to prove it, right now?" The air was suffocating. If she stayed silent, her dream would die instantly. If she said the wrong thing, those 200 pastries would become nothing more than a joke. She drew a long breath, scanning the mix of doubtful and curious faces. Then she spoke, voice trembling but steady. "Yes, my pastries aren't perfect. They don't taste like what you're used to. Because I'm not perfect. I'm a single mom, starting from nothing, baking in a borrowed kitchen with blistered hands and not a dime to my name. But that's why every pastry here is real. As real as my life. And if you want something that tastes of grit, of truth, of love, then this is it." The cafe fell silent. A beat of stillness, and then, the middle-aged man began clapping. Slowly, Others joined in. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was steady. Mrs. Simmons raised an eyebrow, the faintest curve touching her lips. She said nothing, only nodded, as though silently admitting she had passed the first test. And in her eyes, for the first time, burned something new, not just hope but belief. In herself. The applause still echoed, but before it could turn into triumph, Mrs. Simmons raised her hand. Silence fell instantly. She walked to the pastry table, picked one up, and locked eyes with her. "You did well," she said coolly. "But real success isn't measured by a few claps. Customers might be moved once, but they won't come back if the quality doesn't hold." Her breath hitched. Each word sliced like a blade. "Next week," Simmons continued, "I want you to supply pastries for all 4 branches. Not 200 servings. 1,000. 1,000. Her mind spun. The number crashed into her skull. 1,000 servings? She wasn't even sure she could afford the ingredients, let alone manage the manpower or equipment. And, Simmons added, her tone cutting sharper, every single one must be consistent. No mistakes. If even one customer complains, just one, the game is over. Her heart clenched. Part of her wanted to scream, impossible. But another voice whispered, this is the only chance to break free from this life. She looked at her son, his small hand clutching hers, his eyes shining with unshakable belief. And she knew she couldn't back down. She swallowed hard and nodded. Fine. 1,000. I'll do it. Mrs. Simmons smiled faintly, a mix of encouragement and cruelty. Welcome to the real battlefield of business.
1,000. The number echoed in her mind like an endless nightmare. The moment she left the cafe, she nearly collapsed on the sidewalk, whispering into her hands, "How can I ever? 1,000 pastries, 1,000 chances to succeed, and 1,000 chances to fail." And yet, as always, she stood back up. Not because the fear was gone, but because behind her was a pair of little eyes that believed in her completely. She launched her large-scale production plan in the most pitiful way possible. Her tiny apartment overflowed, flour bags stacked in corners, butter crammed into the fridge until it groaned like it was begging for mercy, sugar spilling across the floor. She rented a few old ovens from a thrift store. They rattled and clanked like a squad of dying tractors. On the very first night, one went pop and died, belching black smoke, sending neighbors screaming about a fire. One angry tenant shouted, "Are you trying to turn this place into a factory?" She bowed, forced a smile. "No, this is just my dream." "Friends?" None stepped in. "You're insane," they said. "If you fail, you'll be out on the streets." But still she worked, eyes hollow, hands blistered, voice ragged from exhaustion. Her little boy became her supply team, handing her water, wiping her sweat, and proudly scribbling a sign that read, "Factory Supermom, no crying, only baking." She looked at the crooked sign and burst into laughter, tears streaming down her face. A laugh both foolish and fierce. Because even if the whole world was against her, she still had the smallest and most loyal army, her son. 4 days left. Then 3. Then 2. Time passed like a blade at her throat, cold, merciless. She became a machine. 1 or 2 hours of sleep, then back up. Hands kneading dough, eyes shutting, head slumping onto the table, only to jolt awake at the smell of burning. Every ruined batch was a stab straight to the heart. Disaster piled on disaster. One night, the last bag of flour was ripped open by rats, powder scattering across the floor like snow. She collapsed, trembling, trying to scoop it up with her bare hands, tears dripping into the mess. Then her little boy crawled over, scooping flour clumsily, singing in his tiny voice, "Factory Supermom, no crying, only baking." That innocent song made her laugh through her tears. And so, they carried on. Neighbors whispered, "She's gone mad. Who could bake 1,000 pastries in that dump of a kitchen?" Others sneered, She'll fail, just wait. Each word cut her, but also fueled the fire inside. On the penultimate night, at 3 a.m., she collapsed at the table. Her whole body screamed, her vision blurred. "I can't," the words almost slipped out. But then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you're baking for Simmons. I was a customer last time. If you need an extra pair of hands, I'm willing to help." She froze. In the middle of despair, a hand reached out. Not a miracle, just one stranger, remembering the taste of truth in her pastry. But it was enough. Enough to make her rise, wipe her tears, and fight on. 2 days left. The fire was nearly burning her alive, but it was also carrying her toward the dawn. The final night. No room for error. The tiny kitchen had become a true battlefield. Old ovens groaned, batch after batch rolling out, the air thick with scorching. Heat like the pits of hell. She, her little boy, and the stranger who had volunteered were all fighting non-stop. One kneaded dough, one cut pastries, one boxed them. Every movement repeated hundreds of times until hands went numb, trembling with exhaustion. Then disaster struck. One oven blew out with a loud pop, sparks flying, black smoke billowing, chaos. Erupted. Her son clutched his teddy bear, eyes wide with fear. The helper shouted, "Oh God, we're finished!" For a heartbeat she froze, her heart sinking into the abyss. Part of her wanted to collapse right there. But then she inhaled sharply and roared, "No, we're not done! The other ovens still work. Keep going!" The suffocating panic turned into manic frenzy. She baked, calculated, commanded, urging her 2 makeshift teammates forward. Each pastry came out of the oven, slid into boxes, stacked high like a wall of hope. The clock ticked cruelly. 3 a.m. 4 a.m. 5 a.m. Her vision blurred, her blistered. Hands cracked and bleeding, but she did not stop. And when the first light of dawn spilled through the window, the final row of boxes stood complete, 1,000. She collapsed onto the floor, sweat, flour, and tears smeared across her face. Her son ran to her, hugging tight, shouting, "My superhero did it!" She laughed, trembling but proud. Yes, she didn't. Yet know how customers would react, or if Simmons would nod in approval. But she had already won the greatest battle of her life, the battle against herself. That morning, the sky was unusually clear, but inside her, storms raged. 1,000 pastry boxes crammed into rented vans. She, her son, and her new ally scrambled to load them, each step feeling like they carried their destiny. At the grand opening of the new branch, the atmosphere buzzed, balloons, banners, crowds pressing in. She carried the first box inside, her heart pounding out of her chest. Mrs. Simmons stood waiting, her gaze sharp, though with a glint of curiosity. 1,000 servings, Simmons said evenly. All intact? She nodded, sweat dripping. Despite the crisp morning air, the pastries were laid out on long tables. Customers gathered. Murmurs rose. "They say a single mom made these? Really? Can they even be good?" A young customer took a bite. The crowd hushed. She held her breath, fists clenched so tight they nearly bled. The customer chewed slowly, then smiled. "Wow, this is different, actually delicious. I'll take another box." The murmurs turned into exclamations. Another tried, then another. Some laughed. "A bit sweet but fun to eat," others remarked. "Definitely better than the big chains." In moments, the pastry table was swarmed. Staff scrambled to set out more boxes. Her son, watching with sparkling eyes, whispered, "Mommy, they like your pastries." Her lips trembled, tears welling. Not from exhaustion, but because, for the first time, her work was embraced by a crowd of strangers. In the corner, Mrs. Simmons stood silent, observing like a judge. As the line of customers grew, her lips curled ever so slightly. But the woman knew that smile wasn't the final victory. The true decision was still to come. When the last boxes were laid out, the cafe buzzed like a festival. Customers crowded in, voices mixing, praise, comments, even a few critiques. But most were positive. Nobody had expected pastries born from a shabby little kitchen to spark this much excitement. She stood off to the side, trembling hands clutching her chest. Every gaze turned to one person, Mrs. Simmons. The powerful woman stood arms crossed, scanning the room with her icy stare. Then she stepped forward, picked up a pastry, and took a small bite. Silence fell. In that moment, though the cafe was packed, it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Mrs. Simmons chewed slowly, then set the pastry down. A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Good," she declared. "Not perfect, but different. And that difference is valuable. From today, you are the official supplier for my cafe chain." Cheers erupted from the corner. Her son leapt up, hugging her tightly. "Mommy, you won!" She broke into tears. Not of fear this time, but of relief, of joy, because finally, after countless rejections, a door had opened. But Simmons wasn't finished. She fixed her with a piercing gaze. "This is only the beginning. Business isn't a place for the faint-hearted. Are you ready to keep going? Because if you say yes, the road ahead will be 100 times tougher." She lifted her head, wiped her tears, and squeezed her son's hand. Her voice shook but burned with resolve. "I'm ready. I've come this far. I'm not turning back." In that moment, the fate of a broke single mom shifted forever, toward the path of becoming a billion-dollar CEO. That day, as she walked out of the cafe with her first contract in hand, she was no longer the trembling woman who once bowed under rejection. She walked tall, eyes swollen from tears, but blazing with light. From a broke single mom, mocked, dismissed, written off, she had turned pain into fire, and every tear into sweetness baked into her pastries. Yes, it was only the beginning. The road ahead would be harsher, 100 times tougher. But now she knew, with resilience, with refusal to quit, every limit could be broken. Her little boy squeezed her hand and asked softly, "Mommy, what will you be when I grow up?" She bent down, smiling, whispering like a vow. "A CEO, sweetheart. A real CEO." And in that moment, a new journey began. The journey to turn a fragile dream into a billion-dollar empire.